All right. We got Jimmy High Roller back with another video when you're the best player in the world. No one cares. I think it's talking about Luka because he's the thumbnail.
What do you call a player who is averaging 34, 9, and 10 a game on 62% true shooting? The face of the NBA? The best basketball player in the world? How about the player who is 4th on the NBA's MVP leaderboard at the moment? 10 years ago, these numbers would have had a player in conversations as the greatest basketball player ever, let alone the MVP for a season. But now this stat line hardly even earns you a shot to become the league's most valuable player. Lately, I've been paying close attention to how the MVP race is playing out this season, and it's going about how you would expect. The season started out with Jokic leading the race coming off a very controversial decision last season. Then Joel Embiid morphed into a basketball god for 2 months and buried all hopes of anyone else winning the award. And then he got hurt, and Jokic jumped back out in front and has held the top spot ever since, with currently SGA in 2nd and Giannis in 3rd. But as I was going over the timeline of the race this season, one thing jumped out at me. Why is Luka Doncic so low? I'm going back and looking at some of his performances and his numbers from this season, and yep, they're still completely unreal. So why is he all the way in 4th place at the moment? Have voters gone on a Luka strike? They all just collectively decided they're not going to vote for him? I don't know, maybe...
He doesn't have any narrative behind him, that's why. He just, you know what I'm saying? Kyrie stayed with the Mavs, and Kyrie Lee probably would have been higher up in the list, but Kyrie stayed. Luka just has the higher narrative because his team is better, and he come off a championship season. And Shea, no one expected the Thunder to be in 1st place in the West, so that's why he's number 2. Who's number 3? Giannis. Everything you have to do with the coaches, the Dame. You just don't have the narrative, man. You gotta have the narrative. That's how Russ won MVP. Russ won MVP after the triple-double for the first time in NBA history in about like 75 years, and he had the narrative on top of that, so he was like anonymous MVP. He should have been unanimous MVP because KD left him.
Play style is just too polarizing to reward. His game right now is often
he just don't got the narrative, that's all.
To prime James Harden, and we all know how that turned out. But even Harden and all of his antics still won an MVP award. On the NBA's
because he had the best record in the NBA, bro, that year. They had the best record in the NBA. You couldn't ignore it. And he was leading the NBA in scoring. He led the NBA in scoring, and his team had the best record in the NBA. So he had to win it. And many people thought LeBron should have won it that year. He was second. He was a strong second place. A strong second place. Not a weak second, but a strong second place. But Harden deserved it that year.
On the NBA's last weekly recap of the race, it seems they've taken a strong stance on his chances of winning the award up to this point. Sorry, Mavs fans, but the standings matter. We understand he's scored 25+ points in 9 straight games. But flashy highlights and massive numbers aside, Doncic needs to lift Dallas out of play-in tournament territory to climb near the top of this list.
Yep, and it helps. Then it don't help that you don't have no narrative.
But that
you don't got no story.
Is it? In fact, I know it's not, because other players have won just as many games as Luka is winning this season, with worse numbers and less individual dominance, and they still went on to win the MVP. Luka Doncic is being held to a higher standard than anyone else right now. And I think we might be looking at the MVP award and how we value players.
I know, the stories is annoying, but this is how the voters do it. You need to have a story to your season, bro. If you don't have a story, you're not going to be voted MVP. That's all it is. You don't have the best record in the league. Luka has help. And he's in a play-in, flirting with the play-in.
Today's video.
Max.
When Luka Doncic first entered the league in 2018, he immediately leapfrogged all the assumptions we had about his game and his potential. By his 2nd season, his 29 points, 9 rebounds, and 9 assists a game earned him first-team All-NBA and a 4th place finish in the MVP voting at just 21 years old. By the end of his 2nd season, the general perception was that this guy was the future of the NBA. An MVP award was inevitable, and it would happen sooner than later. But Luka is now in his 6th season in the league, and despite getting better nearly every single season, his place on the MVP leaderboard has only fallen virtually every season. Voters seeming to become less and less interested in this Luka magic. How did Luka's best case for the most valuable player in the NBA come in just his 2nd season and has only gone downhill since? Are we looking at the MVP award all wrong? Is it
P, you
even
couldn't get
possible
that?
for someone to be the most valuable player in the
Not
NBA
even fast.
while not elevating their team to a title contender? A question not applying to just Luka, but to any player in general. Where exactly is the balance between individual dominance and team success when evaluating the top talents in the NBA? If the Nuggets ran into some injuries and had a tough stretch of games and somehow fell to the 7th seed, would we be willing to admit that Nikola Jokic is still the best and most valuable player in the league despite the lack of team success? Is it possible
Best maybe, or maybe not, but most valuable, no.
to get voter fatigue or even player fatigue before a player has even won anything? Here's a number for you.
Why you get
41.8.
fatigued if someone not even won anything yet?
This is the number you get if you combine the average points, rebounds, and assists per game of every MVP winner over the last 30 years. This season, Luka is averaging 53.2 combined points, rebounds, and assists, the highest combined total since Kareem over 50 years ago in 1972. And putting up numbers like this usually results in winning games and winning an MVP. Most of the players near the top of this list have earned the award for their efforts. Kareem missed out on the award in 1973, but he already won back-to-back MVPs in the previous 2 seasons. James Harden came in second in 2019, but he already won the award in the previous season as well. Luka, on the other hand,
So did Jokic. Jokic already won the award in the previous season. He won it again in 2022.
seems to be suffering from a rare case of voter fatigue.
And he had the story. He didn't have his second best player. In 2021, Murray went down. So Jokic got to raise his play, and he did that. And he won an MVP. The next season, Jokic put up crazy stats. Didn't have a second best player. Michael Porter Jr. was in and out the lineup. That's the story. You need the story. He don't got a story.
Or winning any awards. Raising the bar to first team All-NBA in just your sophomore season means every year after that must be even better if you really want to captivate an audience. And Luka has gotten better every single season. So maybe he's just not winning enough games. The unwritten rule about the MVP award has always been that you not only need to be great, but your team needs to be great. But this isn't always the case. In fact, recently, it's hardly the case, and voters have not shied away from rewarding exceptional seasons, even if it didn't result in overall team success. In 1987, after just over 2 seasons in the league, Michael Jordan finished second in MVP voting ahead of generational talents and vets of the 80s, despite closing the season with a record below 500 and finishing the season on a stretch of 15 losses in 23 games. He was young.
I want to say
He was
15 losses in a row? Jordan? Lost 15 games? That's not the Jordan I know. Like the Jordan he would have crashed out.
unproven.
The Jordan I know would have crashed out if he lost 15 in a row.
And yet voters were still so enamored by his individual dominance that they just looked past the lack of team success.
Well, it was
One
different because that was the 80s.
argument you can make for this season
Even the
is
old heads will
fact
tell you
it
that.
happened
Oh, this is
nearly
different. That's
40
different.
years ago in a league where numbers like this were unheard of. But a similar case of
But he won
crazy
the next season, though. He won in 88.
numbers and individual performance outweighing overall team performance just happened again a couple seasons ago. In 2022, Nikola Jokic won the league MVP after finishing the season with just 48 wins and the 6th seed in the West. His numbers were incredible, and his advanced metrics were even better. In fact, he was so good that the lackluster 48-win total was a bit of an afterthought for many voters. The only thing is, this season, the Mavericks are on pace to winning 48 games as well. And as loaded as Jokic's stat line was in that 2022 MVP campaign, Luka's numbers are just about as good this season. So how does one of these seasons earn a player his 2nd consecutive MVP, and the other hardly even earn a player a spot on the MVP
Already said it.
leaderboard?
Already said it.
I think the most glaring case of a player winning over voters with a historic individual season was back in 2017,
Yep.
when Russell Westbrook lit the whole league on fire for 81 games and averaged a 30-point triple-double for an entire season. This was just
Ooh.
7 years ago, averaged a 30-point triple-double for an entire season. This was just 7 years ago, and it's already
Yes,
easy to
sir.
forget triple-double for an entire season. This was just 7 years ago, and it's already easy to forget just how inconceivable this was at the time. There is not a person on earth who thought a player could
Yeah,
average
CJ
a
McCollum.
triple-double for
No,
an entire
no. Go
There
back
is
full
not
screen.
a person
Yes.
on earth who thought a
LeBron, CJ McCollum, Blake, Miles Turner, Ronnie Terrell. Y'all born in 2010s, 2000. Know nothing about no Ronnie Terrell. Dame Lillard, Jamal Crawford, KG.
player could average a triple-double
Hall of Famers, bro.
season. So when Westbrook pulled it off, the MVP award had his name on it.
Yep.
And rightfully so. But the Thunder finished with the 6th seed and just
He has the story behind him. That season, KD was with the Warriors.
47
I told you.
wins. In fact, James Harden and Kawhi Leonard both had strong cases to be the most valuable player in the league that
But Russ
season.
had that story.
So again, what has changed between then and now?
That's just
did
how
we
it
go
is.
From being so captivated with a stat line like this to just casually brushing aside a similar season in just 7 years. But Westbrook's triple-double season in 2017 didn't just shatter our ideas of what were possible from an individual player. His season completely altered the way MVP voting works altogether. Up until
Russ changed the whole MVP conversation, bro. Yep, he changed it.
completely
Russ.
altered the way MVP voting works
Russ changed everything.
together. Up until Westbrook's 2017 season, the MVP award was virtually the best player on the best team award. If your team wasn't the first seed or on occasion the second seed going into the playoffs, your chances of winning the award were almost non-existent. From 1988 to 2016, 23 of 29 regular season MVPs went to players who led their team to the best record in their conference. 5 of the 29 MVPs went to players who earned the second seed, and only 1 went to a player who didn't lead their team to a top 2 seed. But with Westbrook's MVP in 2017, voters of the award and fans in general almost recalibrated the way they approached the discussion of who the most valuable player in the league can be and what is required of them. Because 4 of the last 7 MVPs finished the season with the 3rd seed or lower. This season, Jokic is favored to win the award, and the Nuggets are on pace to finishing the season with the 3rd seed as well. Something that only occurred once in 37 seasons and required the best player of all time to put up the best individual season of his career is about to happen for the 5th time.
So Jimmy thinks Jordan's the best player of all time.
just 8 years. It's almost as if
Y'all gonna argue with Jimmy on that?
all realize that winning the most games is not the end-all be-all to what makes a player the most valuable. 10 years ago, an NBA fan posted this on Reddit, and reading it is almost like jumping into a time machine and traveling into the past. He goes on to list the last 30 MVP winners and the seed they earned going into the playoffs, recognizing the correlation between winning the most games and winning the MVP. And he posted this with a note at the end that tells you everything you need to know about how the award worked just 10 years ago. I put this on here so people hopefully stop making unlikely MVP predictions. No, Anthony Davis is not going to lead the Pelicans to the 5th seed and win MVP. And the comments on this thread are just as insightful as the post itself. So is it really an MVP award? In theory, yes, but maybe it's more of a best player on the best team. Players do not win MVPs getting 6th seeds, overwhelming majority of the time, because this is a superstar league and superstars get top seeds. And this fan is right. Or at least he was
10 years ago. Yep.
So
Times
why do we
changed
make
because of Russ.
exceptions
Times changed because of Russell Westbrook.
for other players and continue to do so, but we hold Luka to such a strict standard? If the Mavs
And
were
maybe because he's been a pro since he was 16 years old, so the voters used that against him. I don't know why. Whoop-de-doo!
nice
Yeah. Remember, Luka's been a pro since he was 16,
stretch of wins to
and he already has an MVP in the Euro League.
close out the season and finish with, let's say, 53 wins instead of 48.
That's not
finish
gonna
with the
happen.
4th
That's
seed
not gonna
instead of
happen.
the
We're gonna have a
6th.
better record than the Mavericks, bro. We're gonna have a better record than the Mavericks. Relax.
Would that really help Luka's case?
No.
The Mavs could have an easy schedule to close out the season. Kyrie could go on a tear. The team could get into a rhythm and earn a higher seed.
Oh, yeah, he's definitely not winning MVP. He definitely ain't winning MVP.
And Luka
He
could be
definitely not winning MVP.
playing
I'm sorry to say that, but if Kyrie goes in the tear, yeah, you're definitely not winning MVP, buddy boy. You're not winning MVP, Luka.
at the same level he did all season. But since they're winning more games, none of which had anything to do with Luka playing better, he would miraculously have a better case for the MVP. I know this is how it works. This is the nature of this award. But it's still a bit odd that there is so much weight put into some factors when considering who the most valuable player in the league is.
And
And the season Luka is having in particular is shining a massive light on this irrational way of going about this. Is Jason Tatum more valuable than Luka this season? You could make the argument. and
Yeah,
I'm
he don't got the story behind him. That's the thing. You need the narrative.
sure there's a lot of
Narrative is
people who
important,
would,
people.
including the NBA's MVP leaderboard.
I don't like it either, but this is how the voters are.
And yet, Luka has been more valuable this season, according to virtually every single metric other than win totals. Jason Tatum has missed 5 games this season, and in those games, the Celtics have outscored their opponents by 77 points. This season, Luka has missed 8 games, and in those games, the Mavericks have been outscored by 47 points. When Jason Tatum isn't on the court, the Celtics are plus 10.1 points per 100 possessions this season. When Luka isn't on the court, the Mavericks are minus 2.8 points per 100 possessions this season. When Tatum isn't on the court, the Celtics are still really good. When Luka isn't on the court, the Mavericks are terrible. To look at how many wins a team has as the driving factor for the MVP race neglects how teams even got those wins and how much the best player on that team is contributing to those wins. Now, this season might actually be a case of the league getting a whole lot better, or maybe just the stats getting better, rather than voters and fans appreciating different aspects of the game and its players.
Way too old to be dunking like that, bro.
The threshold for what it takes to make, let's say, an all-NBA team, earn the label of superstar, and win the league's MVP has been raised so high that a player could have a one-of-one, unprecedented season.
Is Brunson in the MVP conversation?
Has been raised so high.
He got some narrative behind him. You play in New York City, you always want to be some narrative behind you. You know, you Brunson in the MVP convo?
Have a one-of-one, unprecedented season and not even get a mention as one of the league's best players. A great case of this is Domantas Sabonis.
Baby Sabo.
Who's averaging 20 points, 13 rebounds, and 8 assists a game right now. And he wasn't even selected as an all-star.
Yeah, it's crazy. Russ had when Russ had his MVP season, he wasn't an all-star starter. He came off the bench.
This season. These are not empty stats. He's not a product of the system he plays in. He is a certified star. But since there's a guy in the league who can do all of this and more, he ends up being unjustly labeled as the watered-down version of Nikola Jokic.
What do you call him that? Baby Sabo?
It feels a bit surreal.
Did you see him when he was in Indiana before they traded him for Halliburton?
That we live in a time where a player like Luka Doncic exists.
He was playing, hey, Baby Sabo played with Russ when he won MVP. His rookie year.
Numbers like these, and the MVP award isn't already boxed up and on the way to his house as we speak. And this realization is less about Luka and more about the big picture of the league right now.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to wrap my mind around how much things have changed,
yeah,
and even harder to grasp how quickly they have changed. How can he be this good and still be trailing behind multiple other players?
He doesn't have narrative.
If it wasn't for Embiid getting hurt, Luka could very well not even be within the top 5 on the MVP leaderboard, while averaging nearly a 34-point triple-double and being on pace for 48 wins. Which begs the question, what would a player in Luka's position need to do to win the MVP? With the 6th seed,
but I'm not gonna say it.
Supporting cast, and a handful
I'm not gonna say it. I know, but I know.
Superstars to contend with. What would be the equivalent to the 2017?
Well, I think I already said it though. I think I already said at the beginning of the video. If Kyrie left in free agency, if Kyrie left in free agency, then yeah, he probably would have been up there.
24, where the numbers are just too absurd to ignore. 38, 10 and 10, maybe 40 points, 12 rebounds, and 12 assists a night on league high efficiency. It sounds like hyperbole, but it's not. How good do you have to be to win the MVP in today's NBA? When you put the bar as high as Luka did at such a young age, how much higher would you need to go for it to be impossible for fans and voters to ignore your efforts? Or is
it's either that, he needs to get some narrative, he needs to average 40, 12, and 12, get some narrative, or go 74 and 8. That's the only 3 ways he can do it. That's the only 3 ways he can win MVP. Go 74 and 8, get some narrative, or average 40, 12, and 12.
MVP award still just the best player on the best team award.
W video. It's just how the times we live in. These voters, they love the narrative. They love the narrative. They don't care about your stats, your team record. If you don't got no narrative, you not the MVP. That's just how it is with these voters, bro. It's sad, but this is what it is.